Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. This evening, we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is very important, very interesting, that ties into the world of youth and education of our youth and trying to help our young people, especially our teens and preteens, come to grips with the fact that when you go out into the real world, things are different than they were when you were in school. And to help me with this conversation is Sumant Pendharkar, who is an author and motivational speaker and has written a great book for kids that we'll talk about as we get going here. So Sumant, pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me on Reference Point.
Thank you, Dave. Delighted to be here this evening.
Glad you're here too, because this is a very interesting topic. And what I'm very intrigued about, and I think you and I had chatted about this a little bit earlier before the show, was what was it that caused you to have such a strong personal interest in assisting in this environment, to do something that would impact kids? What was it that got you to the point where that seemed like the right thing to do?
Back in the 90s, Dave, while working in high tech, as I did the usual circuit of all the major Bay Area companies, we were so desperate to hire that if we could find a warm body, we would hire the person to fill the spot and do some work, any work.
Those were the days.
Those were the days, yes. And unemployment, I think, was at the time 2.9% or something. So there were plenty jobs, and actually more jobs than we could find the people. And I was in a management position, and I had a budget for hiring. In fact, I was measured on how many people I could hire, which is kind of crazy because you should be measured for something else than just hiring. Flew to India, I flew to Canada, to various places in the world to try to bring people back to work in the United States.
You had to bring people back to work in the U.S. You
Yes.
couldn't find them here in the States?
No, we could not find them here.
Wow.
And we had ads, we had recruiters, we had all those headhunters, pay all the kind of money, but we just couldn't find people. And I have this kind of a problem-solving approach to things in life. And I figured out the problem right now is that we can't find people. So what is the cause? What's causing this? So I took a step back to figure out, why is it that the local native-born people who are U.S. residents, why are they not applying for these jobs? And these jobs were plenty and in high-paying jobs.
Right.
And so I started doing some research. And I thought initially it was something to do with career planning.
Yeah, that would make sense. You would think, yeah.
That why people not enrolling in computer science courses or engineering or science who would obviously qualify for these kind of jobs.
Which is the sort of thing that you would expect to be talking about with your high school guidance counselor and stuff like that.
Correct. And so I started doing more deeper research. And then I thought maybe it would be a good idea to write a book for teenagers to start planning their careers.
Oh, that's reasonable, yeah.
So again, I wrote out a table of contents, showed it to a few friends. And one of my very close friends, Danny Urbatska, said, your book is not right for a 16-plus age group. You should write something for a younger age group, because it seems to be in the United States that children make up their minds whether they will finish high school and go to college between the ages of 10 and 14.
Between 10 and 14, which is
Yes.
right there in the middle school range,
That's right.
before they're actually getting into high school. Oh, that's interesting. They'll make up their minds as to whether they're going to complete high school before they actually even get there?
That's right.
That's a revelation.
And this study has been substantiated multiple times, that kids are making the decisions that early on.
Wow.
So that prompted me to write a book called Raising Yourself, Making the Right Choices.
So what is it, what's going on in their lives that they're making these kinds of decisions at that age? I mean, it seems like a pretty significant decision to make. I'm probably not going to complete high school. Why should I bother? What's going on in the environment of the young people that would be even something they would be thinking about?
So here's what happened. When I was researching the book, Raising Yourself, I interviewed kids in their low teens to adults in their 80s.
Wow.
And I asked them, what kind of career guidance did you have when you were growing up? And you're going to be shocked that I heard this from multiple people, that my parents never set any expectations. They never said.
Parents never set expectations.
My parents did not say, go to college. They pretty much said, do whatever you want. I have a personal story to share with you, Dave.
Please.
In 1980, I was in first year college, in business school back in India. And I heard through my grapevine of friends that there was a course that was being taught on COBOL programming.
COBOL program.
Do you remember
okay.
that language?
Oh, I remember COBOL.
And so I called my father. I was in a different state for my education, and I called my father and said, "There's this class that's being taught in COBOL programming. It's going to cost $1,000 or $1,000 or whatever. Do you mind if I take it?" The answer that I got from my father on the phone was, "Run. Go enroll for that class right now. I will wire the money to your local guardians, but enroll for that program."
Wow.
As they say, rest is history.
Well, what was he thinking? What was the purpose behind? I mean, that's a pretty, no thought, just don't have to think about this, just do it type of a decision. So what was the concept behind that, the impetus for him to instruct you to go do that?
Thank you for asking that question. It's very critical. I was hoping you would ask me that. My father, sitting in India, could see the trends that the whole world is moving towards computers.
And this is when again? What?
1980.
1980, okay.
I think it's just around the time when IBM PC was sort of in the
Right,
making.
that's
And I think
very,
it came out in
very
81,
early
if I'm not
times
mistaken, 81,
in
82.
the movement into personal computers. Right.
That's right. And my father worked for Philips, the Dutch
yeah.
multinational company. And so here's the important takeaway from this. My father, sitting in India, could see the trends. Why is it that kids who are growing up here were not getting the similar guidance from their parents?
Great question. And what's the answer?
Okay, so here's another thing. I don't have the answer for you right this minute, but we'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
I was reading the book on Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson.
Mm-hmm.
On page 42, he references that San Jose Mercury ran ads, 60 pages worth of ads, help wanted in the technology sector.
Wow.
60 pages. So somebody who's here in the Bay Area sees those ads and says, "Hey, you know what? My kids should be applying for these jobs."
You would think.
You would think. And that's how Steve Jobs got his job. He saw the posting for Atari, and he went and, whatever. If you've read the book, it's fantastic. But 60 pages in the Bay Area.
Wow.
What about the rest of the country? If all companies need computer people or technology people.
Well, they sure do now. I mean, there is very little, if any, industry where technology is not a key component. Even if you're in a retail environment, or a restaurant, the POS systems, the point of sale systems, and the information that you can do virtually everything on iPads and that, or any kind of a tablet system for you're taking an order and it goes to the kitchen. You can do that in virtually any industry. I know people in the automobile industry, and they're very heavily utilizing technology in the auto sales industry. So you would think that it would be a natural for people everywhere in the U.S. to look at it and say, "Hey, wow, this is the way things are going. If you want to get a good job, you should probably be thinking in terms of getting some kind of understanding and education in the area of high tech." We go back 100 years, that's what people were saying, what you should probably need to do as a skill set so you can get into manufacturing or some of the other tactile skill industries. But you're saying that hasn't been happening here in the U.S. Is that what you're telling me?
That's right. In fact, I have something more interesting to tell you. In fact, even more shocking. There was a significant drop in enrollment for science and technology courses from the year 93 to 98.
From 93 to 98?
And also in the 80s as well. And I've found these statistics on the NSF site, which is for the National Science, National Science.
NSF,
so,
National Science Foundation.
.gov. That's the website. And it's incredible because there's been huge drops. And this is the time when everybody was moving towards computers. So one would think that the parents should say, enroll for a computer science course or go into engineering. And here's something more interesting. I have a background in business. So my undergrad degree is in business with specialization in accounting.
Right.
I switched to the field of computer science by coming to the US, and I did a master's in information systems and computer science.
Okay.
I didn't have to do any physics, no chemistry, no advanced math.
I see.
And I got fabulous jobs in high tech.
So, okay, so what that implies is that there's a perception, an incorrect perception, that if I'm going to go in this direction, I'm going to need to take these kind of very complex, very sophisticated scientific courses, calculus, et cetera, physics, applied physics, whatever. But that's not necessarily the case if you're going into the computer technology world.
That's right.
What's interesting to me about what you're telling me, Sumant, when I think back to the era of the 1960s and into the 70s, when we as a country were just focused and completely moving forward because we had this thing going on with we wanted to land a man on the moon, the Mercury program, the Gemini program, the Apollo program, and it was just like everybody was talking about it, and everybody knew and understood that getting an education in engineering or mathematics or physics or whatever, astronomy, was going to be really significant in helping you to get into part of that arena. But when we kind of got to the 80s, there wasn't anything pushing us in that direction, was there? Do you think that there's any element of that that has to do with the drop-off of interest in getting into the science and mathematics scene?
I think it had more to do with there are two interesting thoughts for that. One is there was no internet at the time. So the competition was only within the United States. And this country dominated the world in technology because there's X amount of people who came up with the technology, and then you had all the sales and everything else that goes with it. So there were plenty jobs which were perhaps not as high paying, but there was no other competition other than the people who came here.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the internet hit. Suddenly, somebody sitting in India could do the job that somebody can do over here.
Yes.
So it's an interesting shift, and so that's why when people talk about globalization and outsourcing and all sorts of stuff, they can take the same job, and if it can be done somewhere else in the world, it is, depending on how much it costs, because the companies look at their bottom line.
Sure.
And they want to get the work done. So where do they go?
So if the competition has increased because anywhere in the world these sorts of things can be done, and you're right, with computer technology and the internet you can have distributed work activity and with real-time connection and all sorts of great things. That being the case, is there a disincentive for U.S. kids to want to move into that arena, or is there something else that's wrong with the system?
I think over time, when there's that course where there's no expectation from home and the parents leave it upon the schools to help guide the children and help them with their career planning. And Dave, I need to share something with you. Back in 2009, I attended a foundation study on how to provide skilled workers who graduate high school. And the interesting thing was there was people from the school districts and there was superintendents of schools, and they all said that we have, because of budget cuts or because of the growing population and the number of students that are coming into the school system, we don't have enough high school or school counselors. In fact, I don't wish to misquote, but I remember the superintendent of one of the school districts in Los Angeles saying that they have one high school counselor, career counselor, for 2,000 students.
For 2,000 students. That's an impossible task.
So I did the math. If you do even 8 per day, and you multiply, and then you take the number of days that are worked, and you take one counselor, that person, if he's lucky, meets that student once in a year.
Oh, my goodness.
You can't tell that student in one hour meeting where it takes 15 minutes to warm up, maybe they're not in the right mood to be receptive, that, oh, gee, I think you should be a doctor, or I think you should be a scientist, or you should go into engineering, or you should become a lawyer. You need to spend time with the kid.
Of course.
And it's not the job of a high school counselor. The counselor can give guidance
on
how to go about approaching a college or approach colleges.
So what you're telling me is that the parents have tended to abdicate their responsibilities in helping their sons and daughters understand what the options and possibilities are for the future. Is that what you're telling me?
That's correct. And that's what goes back to the research that I did for 2 years for writing this book.
And that's why you wrote this book. And the book is called Raising Yourself, right? Making the Right Choices, and it's targeted at an age group. You said originally you were thinking of something in the 15 to 18,
yes.
and then the 12 or 10.
This is about 10 plus, 10 to 15.
10 to 15
is the right age group.
And it's one of the things that you and I had talked about, Sumant, was that there's here in the U.S. we have a very, especially here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a good, strong population of people who have immigrated here to the U.S. And it's the things that you talk about in this book, and I've read the book, and it's really pretty cool, are relevant to kids anywhere, okay? But I think one of the things that you and I had talked about also was the importance of having the children of folks who have come here from another country learn the language, learn English. And I want to, we've got, I don't know, 10 or 12 minutes left in our show, but I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want to talk more about this book and let people know about the book. So tell me, let's talk about this English language scenario, because there are some communities where they don't really care whether their kids learn English or not. And that's not necessarily an ideal situation. Am I saying that right?
That's right. And in fact, here's a few things. First thing is, the kids and the parents both should learn the language, and that is English. They're living in the United States, the primary language here is English.
Right.
No matter whether they have an accent or not, or how they speak the language, they should at least be able to read and understand the context.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem, unfortunately, is that when the kids here start learning the language, they leave the parents behind.
Uh-huh.
And then the parents are the ones who can actually guide the children in their career planning or college education, or how to approach scholarships, or even how to navigate this regular school system.
Right.
And the parents cannot help them.
Interesting challenge. And that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about that, but that is very clearly makes a lot of sense. And that puts the kid in a position where he does not, the child in a position where he or she does not have that kind of guidance from their parent, even if the parents wanted to offer it to them. They may not be able to accomplish it in a successful manner because they're just not conversant with what's going on. I want to talk a little bit about the book, because in this book is some really interesting chapters in here talking about peer pressure, self-doubt, things that you have to deal with if you're a male or a female when you're young, understanding money, what's it cost to live on your own and stuff like that. And it looks to me like you're trying to give broader perception to a young person that's in their preteen or early teen years about what's life going to be like when you're not living at home anymore. Did I say that right?
Absolutely right. The book is to help them become as self-reliant as possible without leaving the house early, because once they read the section on what does it cost to live on your own, they will realize quickly that it's very expensive to go out and strike it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's a section in the book about the kind of education and how it ties to the kind of income that a person can get.
Yes.
And there are a lot of studies on that, and there's actually incredible amount of statistics that show.
So are kids not getting access to this kind of information generally? I mean, you would think that at the school, because their teachers, or again the counselor has a challenge, or their parents. I mean, this is not hidden data. It's not like the information isn't available. Why would it not be getting down to the kids is one question. But the other question is, how then do you get visibility to this data? By the way, I'm going to hold the book up so that they can do a shot at this. People could see what this book looks like. How do people get access to the kind of information? I mean, what has to happen in order for them to learn about this sort of thing?
David, before I answer your question, let me share something with you. There's quite a bit of me as well in this book. So, confession time. On page 17 of this book, I don't want to sound like one of the books where you just refer to the page numbers all the time, but on page 17 I have a section that says, what does it cost to live on your own?
Right.
I was 14 years old, living in New Delhi at the time, and I came back home with a not so good report card. Well,
we've all done that.
So instead of the usual, all the scolding and you'll be grounded for this and you won't get a treat of this and all that stuff, my father, I guess, had decided on a different tactic. So he just took me around the whole house and he says, everything in this house belongs to your mom and me. And if you want to have the same standard of living, you need to do something for your life, which is education, skilling yourself, going to college, and then getting a good job.
Uh-huh.
And so...
And how old were you at that time?
14.
14?
Yes.
Does a light bulb go on?
A light bulb absolutely went off.
Wow.
And I'm going to come back to this in just a second with some more information. But that was a self-realization point for me. So when you say that this kind of information is available, yes, it is. There's tons of writings and all sorts of things which a person needs to know while they're growing up.
Yes.
I put everything in one place in 111 pages. And what I've done is to show them the big picture, that there are phases in life. There's 0 through 20, say, for example, for education, for the basic. And then you go to college and then you do grad school. And you get a job. So from 20 plus to 40 is the years when you're really putting your whole life together.
Right.
So I'm giving them a big perspective in a small place, but they have this, the mind is very powerful because this once self-realization kicks in, you can have an aha moment and say, oh yeah, I need to do this because of this reason.
When I read the book, what impressed me, one of the things that impressed me was how as you progressed through it, it got more, what's the right word? It started out kind of simple and easy and, you know, hey, yeah, this is really cool. You got to think about this, think about that. But as you started getting further in the book, you started to get more into real situations, in what's life really like, and it was a little bit more impactful, I guess is the word for it. And it seems like you deliberately had a progression there, which makes sense, because if a kid's going to pick up a book, the first couple pages, if they're not interested, they're not going to go on. But if they're drawn in, kind of like a Harry Potter book, and they're drawn in, they're going to go through the whole thing. And I think you've accomplished that, which is very cool.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask something of you, because I know that with respect to this book that you had you self-published this book, and you've done some other things. You've done some other books too. So I'm going to ask if you would be willing to come back for another show and talk about publishing, because that's a whole other area self-publishing is. And there's a lot of folks out there, you know, myself included, who have thought about, wouldn't it be great if I could write a book, you know? And you've accomplished that.
Yes.
We'll talk about that in another episode, but I want to get back to this book here and get a feel for how you have successfully managed to get kids to read this book. How have you managed?
So wherever possible, if I've had a chance to talk to the parent, I tell the parents that they should solicit feedback from their child by telling the teenager that you have met the author and the author wants your feedback.
Oh, that's nice.
So that is a very powerful thing where the teenager says, oh, the author wants my feedback. And so I said, provide them my cell phone or my email and have at it and let them give back their candid feedback.
Nice. That's a good idea.
And I've actually received that.
So do you go to PTA meetings or
I speak in schools.
Okay.
Yes, and I'll do a lot of community events as well. This book is my payback to the community.
Okay.
And so I make myself available to speak in schools or any events wherever something like this would be of use.
And I'm going to grab my glasses here for a second and let the audience know. Hillview Books is your company for publication, right?
That's correct.
There's a graphic that's going to go up, but if anybody wants more information about raising yourself, etc., a little bit more about what's the content in this book, they can go up to hillviewbooks.com. But I think that, you know, what kind of feedback have you got? I mean, have you been seeing results from this? Let me step back a second. When was the book originally released?
The English version was released in 2001.
The English version?
Yes.
There's another version?
That's it. I have the book in Spanish as of last year. Es creciendo, tomando las decisiones correctas por ti mismo.
Very cool. Okay, so English and Spanish. Any other languages?
No, not
just those
yet.
two. Okay,
yes.
So it first came out in 2001 in English, and in Spanish in
2012.
2012. Okay. Have you been getting feedback? Have kids reading it? Are they responding to
yes.
it?
I have received emails. I received phone calls. I actually got a phone call from a 12-year-old. He said, I read the book. I won't disclose names on the program right now. He says, I really like the book because I read the section on what it costs to live on your own, and I realized that I have to earn to live well.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
That's
for
very
a 12-year-old.
powerful for a 12-year-old. I had a 10-year-old girl walk up to me at an event, and she said, my parents bought the book for me, and I read the book. I normally don't read nonfiction. A 10-year-old telling me this, I only read fiction, but I like your book.
Nice.
I have a section separately in the book for raising yourself if you're a female.
Yeah.
And separately for boys as well, because each one of them have certain responsibilities.
Right. That's pretty cool. So why did you do one in Spanish?
The Latino population needs this book. The students here need the book. I'm an immigrant. I came here from India, and I felt that going through navigating the system here, you can do, if you have advantages like the language or you learn certain skills, it helps you that much more. And I felt that community would definitely benefit by seeing the book in Spanish. And the book is also useful for the parents. So it opens...
right. Like you were saying earlier, it might be that the parents aren't it can be a little bit more challenging to learn a new language as an adult. There are easy ways to do that, or easier ways to do that, I suppose, but it is more challenging as an adult than as a child. My 3-year-old grandson is doing both English and Spanish these days, which is very cool. I want to let the folks that are watching us know that if they have any questions for you about raising yourself, making the right choices, they can send an email to us here at info@referencepointtv.com. I'll make sure you get the data, and then you can answer their questions. We have just a couple of minutes left in this show about this. This is really very cool. What we've done is we've covered a recognition of that there is a problem, to a certain degree why there's a problem, and the fact that there actually are some solutions, and this is a really interesting and very positive solution. So I want to, in the last minute or so that we have here, Sumant, have you just give a summary of the last 2 or 3 key points that you want people to understand about this challenge and this solution.
I would urge firstly the parents to stay up to par with the trends and see where the jobs are going to be. They can enter a line in their favorite search engine, just what are the future job trends. And there's actual data that gives from the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Services, statistics that provides at bls.gov, provides you the next 2010 to 2020 where the projected jobs are. And they do update those regularly. So
that's a key point. People can go up to bls.gov and find out where the jobs are going to be, which they should be then passing down to their kids. 30 seconds.
Okay.
What do you got?
They also should communicate the urgency to the kids that they have to step up to the plate if they wish to compete on the global playing field.
Which is not a bad thing. There's no reason not to have a global playing field.
Yes.
Sumant, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us your story and this really cool book. Don't forget, folks, you can go up to the website hillviewbooks.com, and I said that right?
Correct. Yes.
And see if you can learn, if you want to learn more about it. I want to thank you so much for being here and joining me on Reference Point. And you're coming back to talk about self-publishing.
Sure thing,
so
I will.
That's good. So ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you out there in the viewing audience. We'll see you next time on Reference Point.